Hello, welcome back to the Public Safety Special Broadcast. I'm, of course, your host, Secret Doves, age 34, Public Safety Special Communications Division 18 Vice Captain, and my contract is with the War Devil. I'm alone this week, and that's why, because we're going to be talking about Yoru, and it's the story has got to the point with it where I don't want any takes that happen here from me to have anybody else attached to them. You know what I mean? Like, you were on the podcast and he said this, da 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 da. It's all just me. You know what I mean? It's just me because the discourse around Yoru has gotten pretty crazy. Rightfully so, because the story has gone to very controversial places, and yeah. So it's just gonna be me. It's just gonna be me. Also, I don't necessarily want myself to be involved with anybody else's takes. I don't know what they're gonna say. I don't screen what the takes people have before they come on the show. So, don't want to get involved with any of that. I just want to talk about the manga, okay? This is gonna be me, talk about what I think about the manga, what I think is going on with the manga, with all this stuff involving Yoru, because a lot of it has been really interesting. It's some very controversial stuff, and I am the sort of face of the Yoru fandom in some ways. So I feel I have a little bit of a responsibility as well to talk about this because, okay, let me start saying this is all this all fits within the story and within the concept of Yoru from the very beginning, and the reason that I got interested in the character, and I'm still interested in the character right now. But man, he really, because Yoru is like the big reveal in the first chapter. She is the inciting incident of the whole story, is Yoru taking over Asa's body in chapter 98. And I thought that was crazy. Chainsaw Man Part 1, known for its absolutely bonkers first chapter, which leads into a pretty good, but much less, captivating first arc after the first chapter. First chapter is nuts, right? Part 2, also nuts. He comes in, he kicks in the door with the War Devil. What's she gonna do? Wow. Sheesh. Jeez, man. That's not what I was expecting. Although, should have been given, well, we'll talk about that too. But, yeah, that played out in a pretty unusual and upsetting fashion. Pretty much, you did it. You you upset us all. Oh God, she's fighting like crazy. No, that's the interesting thing about Yoru when she shows up. It's like you have this clearly, super strong war devil, right? Like that's a crazy thing. In the Chainsaw Man universe, you have this super powerful devil, and you've put it in your main character. They're stuck in the same body as this super evil, crazy, like villainous, super powered devil. It's like Sukuna. People were drawing the Sukuna Yuji parallels in a few chapters ago, which is like, yeah, pretty much. There've been other ones as well. Naruto had one, although it was not as active as Yoru. Yoru's just like, Yoru's a yapper. She's just right fucking there. And she's in full control of the situation. That is another very interesting thing that Fujimoto did with this is usually like the inner demon is like the character is still running the show, but then there's like this dark side that comes out and it destroys shit. And it's usually like in the moment of crisis, the demon comes out and does a bunch of bad shit, but it like resolves the situation. This is not how this works with Asa and Yoru. Yoru is the one in control. Asa loses her autonomy in chapter 98. Loses autonomy over her body. And this, just ominous being is introduced right in the front of the story. Just here you go. Watch this. It's okay, man. That's why I like Yoru, because it's sort of just a huge move from Fujimoto out of the gate, saying, "Here I go. Watch this. Watch what happens. Keep your eyes on Yoru. You know what's up. This is what it is." And here we are. Things are happening. Yoru is doing things, as many people would talk for the couple years where things were getting set in motion. Yeah, she was sort of latent for a long time. A lot of people got very comfortable with the story as not having the war devil do a bunch of evil shit. And now here she is doing a bunch of evil shit. And that was always sort of what I was waiting for as a Yoru fan. I was like, what kind of evil shit is she gonna do? And I should have fucking known. I should have fucking known. He would have to take it into the abuse territory. And there is the sexual assault abuse which occurs. That is a part of it, which we will discuss. But we've seen now even more other kinds of abusive behavior from Yoru, because this dude, I don't know, he's got something up with his mind. He's just fascinated by these, especially abusive woman characters. I do wonder about that. But, who knows? Could just be a fascination of his. But I mean, we've seen a lot of abusive men coming through in this, in part 2 as well. So, he's digging in to the whole abuse, the whole smorgasbord of abuse that exists within society. Lots of different aspects of like adults and youths and abusive relationships between them. Lots of that in part 2. Seems to be we're getting to the point where that's what it's about. That's what we're going for, which is consistent, right? That is consistent with part 1. That is consistent with The ideas in Chainsaw Man since the very beginning of the story, going to the end of part one, and he's bringing it back in part two. I mean, why? That's what the fucking thing is about. It's like Star Wars is about, I don't know, family and fighting against fascists. Vaguely, Chainsaw Man is about abusive adults and children being victimized by that. So okay, that's what we're doing here. And how does Yoru fit in to that equation? Well, let's get in to the fundamental metaphor of the war devil. So there's a couple things going on. One, something that people are coming around to now, kind of late in my opinion, but whatever. You know, she takes Asa's bodily autonomy. The war, war takes control of your body. This is like classic. This is like a classic thing. You know what I mean? I mean that's war. The state takes control of your body. Your body belongs to the military, etc., etc. Right? That's what we've got. That's what it is. Straight up, we're seeing that. But okay, drilling that down into Asa, character-wise, turns that dynamic, this state subject dynamic, into a character dynamic, which is the same thing that happens with Makima and Denji in part one, right? We see Makima is a control devil. She takes control of Denji's life. We're talking about how the state controls the subject. That sort of abusive control that Makima exerts over Denji is this metaphor for the relationship between the state and the citizen, and it's all in parallel. These are paralleled relationships, talking about how the concept of the self and society is like this abusive relationship, which is dope. That's so fucking sick. I love that. That's so fucking good. Right, and bringing that to war in part two, I mean, we're going big, you know what I mean? We had the Control Devil in part one, we got the War Devil in part two. Ooh, yes, let's do it, Let's see it. And we also have the Famine Devil in there, who we're not going to talk about this time, but she has also a very interesting role in this. And so when we're going through the story, always like Yoru, we're always looking for this concept of how her relationship to Asa fits with the state subject relationship in regard specifically to war, taking control of your body and turning it into a weapon. War. All right? Okay. Great. You're getting it. He's not very this is pretty sort of layered storytelling, but he's not very secretive about it, Chainsaw Man is a little bit difficult to read, I think, because he does ask you to go this far and come with him to this point, let go of the story a little bit, don't worry too much about the details and get into the ideas and come ride this idea train with him, and he's gonna work through stuff. That's what's gonna happen. He's gonna develop ideas, and he's gonna see where they go. And so get ready, lock in to suffer, get on the idea train, get ready to think about what's happening. But I mean, he's not very like subtle. He doesn't really. Makima is the control devil, and you're like, oh, okay. And then she has like a bunch of, public servant bureaucrats on chains attached to her, belly button as if they're umbilical cords, and she gave birth to them. You're like, okay, yeah, Hey, I see. What could this be about? I wonder what he's going for here. Real, just oblique symbolism, you know what I mean? No, he hits you straight in the face with it. He just asks you to go with him. And I do think with Yoru, people kind of forgot. That the story is like, that's what it's about. You know what I mean? They're sort of expecting Yoru to play second fiddle to Asa's development, the story to the Asa and Yoru thing to mainly be about like Asa and what she's going through and her role in society, which is definitely still a big deal, and I think we'll come back to that later. I do believe so. But yours the war devil. That is like a big thing in this story, and that's like war is a big idea in the story. Thus far, you can see it all throughout the story. I'm not gonna go into all of that, but we have the Chainsaw Man War. There's a guy at the beginning talking about War of the Devils. There is the Devil Man reference, war discourse, coming back again. Yeah, there's just everything talks about war, the entire fucking story. Yeah, so much direct discussion of war within the story as a topic. And so in a lot of ways, part 2, it is sort of like centered around Yoru as like the topic of discussion. Like we're gonna get into this idea of war. We have the war devil we brought in early on, build that up with Yoru and Asa, a little bit of Denji in there in the mix. Then we're gonna expand out with Denji. War gets bigger. War comes into Denji's life, not like the devil. They go off screen for a while, but like the concept of war now comes onto Denji, affects Denji's life. And now here we are in the war, and the war devil is doing the war devil stuff. Here we go. It's like it's a fairly, I've said it before, it's a very basic outline for the story. It's nothing too fancy overall. I did think I think he like jumbled the transition a little bit, but each chunk is really, really good, and they fit together pretty well, considering it's like such a long serial. You know what I mean? It all fits. It all makes sense. And we're getting it's fucking good. It's really fucking good. So let's talk all about it. Let's just get into it now, because I think most people overall looking at Yoru, besides a few specific instances, 2 now. No, 3. Okay, 3 now. Yeah. They're all good. They're on board. They get it. You know what I mean? That's what it is. It's a war. Yeah, war and abuse and that. Right. But why does it? Why is there this like toxic romance shit happening at the same time? Why do we have this romantic layer to this war stuff? Why do we have that in the story at all? Like, why is there the romance angle? Even if you go back to Makima, people don't like that one either. You know what I mean? People people will say stuff like, Denji uh wasn't actually sexually attracted to Makima. He was just looking for a mother figure, and it's like I don't know how to explain. Like might be it might fuck you up, but like think about that for a little bit. You might not like what you think, but like, okay, these two things are not mutually exclusive, and in fact, they have many times gone together. Even to this very, very day. Maybe even someone you know. Might be into some stuff. Uh, uh. The whole guy, Siggy F. Sigmund had a few words about this idea. And we're getting into like real pretentious territory, but yeah, it's Fujimoto, that's what he does. And so, I've seen some stuff about like, you know, uh like sexual assault is a part of war very often, which is true. Very, very true. And I don't know, I don't think that's out of the question as to like what he's doing here, but I don't think that's quite it. Because when we're talking about war here, we're not really talking about like the scenes of war. We have some of that. We have some of that in part 2 for sure, and in part 1. Part 1 has the gun devil scene, which is like the big disaster scene, which is very much like horrors of war, horror of the state violence, the scale of destruction, right? Like that's yeah. Oh fuck. That's what we're getting into there. And we have some of that. Yeah, some of that in part 2 for sure. We've got a lot of buildings getting blown up, very destructive to infrastructure in part 2. But most of the story is about like living in the imperial core of a state that has a big military apparatus that is like doing stuff on the world stage, right? That's Aki's story, right? He's like entangled in the machinations of these massive, infrastructures of power. Power? Where is she? She's gonna bust in. She's gonna bust in and save them. That's my prediction for next week. Power busting, busting the tree, punching you in the face. Stupid Denji. Duh. He doesn't like edgy stuff. And then, she drinks the blood and powers back and the manga's good again. Saved. Saved by something funny. God. Whew. But Aki's caught in this machination of power, caught by Makima. And you know, he's just like a pawn in a scheme of the scale of which he could never fathom, and his willful ignorance leads to his demise. You know, his willful ignorance and his lack of concern for his own life leads to his demise. Ugh. Tragic, dark, right? And that tragedy is like, he's a guy. He's like a Japanese guy. He is on a team. He, you know, in this world, the Japanese government is one of the players on the stage, and they have a bunch of weapons, and they have a bunch of soldiers and spies, and they do stuff all around the world. They are like one of the imperial powers. And so this is life in the imperial core when the empire is evil. You are a subject of the evil empire. And this is the relationship between the subjects and the state in those places, in that kind of place. And we get a nice little trip through all the different like horrors that this enacts upon the citizens and the world and everybody, and it's great. So nice, Oh yes. Yay. Suffering. I love suffering. Yes, suffer more. See? That's why I made a contract with the War Devil. I'm fucked up. Suffer more. Right, and so the fact that this kind of assault and abuse is a part of this kind of assault is a part of war in practice out in the field is not exactly what I think we're going for with Yoru. I think it's more the nature of the relations between subjects and the state with regards to war, and how like the citizenry, the subjects' sexuality and autonomy in that realm fits into the paradigm of war. This is a little bit more complicated and a little bit more fucked up in a lot of ways, because it is not, stuff that happens on the battlefield is like, that's horror, right? That's horrific. That's evil. And there's really horrible, evil instances of it going on right now that are very well documented in public, and you can see how people talk about it. It's very fucked up. But the way that kind of violence is baked into society through social structures is a big part of the discussion around war. So for example, before I get into the big relationships here, for example, look at the Chainsaw Man church, right? You have this church. This church wants to start the Chainsaw Man war. They want to start a war. Oh, and what do they have going on the front side? Children getting married and having children. They go after the youths. They have the youths get married very young and have children. And this was also a thing in fascist Japan. There were slogans about like, go have kids. Giving birth to children is like, that's what you can do for your country, ladies. Have a bunch of children so we can make your children soldiers and then grind them into paste, right? Love that. Wonderful. Right? It is in a different dimension, removing people's bodily autonomy, decisions about their lives, and treating them as tools, as resources in your war game, right? Coming back to Control, who's still around in the story, but always exploring these vectors of power, these vectors of control, but very specifically the give birth to soldiers, get married young is very directly tied to war as an idea of we are going to be a protracted imperial army taking over the world. And in real life you can see this kind of stuff, fascists are really obsessed with birth rates and this idea of groups of people fighting each other, fucking always thinking about fighting, and everything is about war, battles, right? And that's why you need GDP to win the fight, right? All this kind of stuff. But again, I'm trying not to go too far in the real life, get too far out in the weeds, but you gotta do something. Right, so that's just one example. And so we see now this war metaphor, it's all throughout the story. Everything is centered around life within war, even including the fact that war as a topic is erased from discussion. Because that's another aspect of it. If you lived during the Iraq War, you would know that eventually people really started talking about it. But for a long time, dissenting voices, you're not really you're not going anywhere. Everyone's on the same page. Everyone's down to do war. It was a very crazy, weird, cultural landscape. And that is there in Chainsaw Man as well. People don't want to think about the war even as the war is going on. People want to forget about the war. And when Yoru comes back, initially, that's the situation. Everyone has forgotten about war, and this is about society rediscovering war. But war is already there in the structures of society, hidden. And that's why you have at the very beginning of the story this guy talking about making a mistake. We are at war with the devils. The war is already happening. And the two sides, you got the humans versus the devils. I'm already fighting, but that conflict has now been baked into society. We get this we move through different aspects of society, seeing how the idea of war impacts different dimensions. Okay. It's the first time we see that with Yuko and the Devil Hunters Club. If we go back to it, I'm gonna go through the whole thing. Right, Yuko and the Devil Hunters Club, they send all these youths, all these teenagers again, out to go fight the devils, right? They looking back on it now, that's the thing, right? That's the thing about it, is there's this auditorium and it's full of these teenagers, these high schoolers, and they are being sent out, not even armed, right? They have to go get some weapons. So they just go out of town and they get some weapons. I mean, look at this militarized society, right? You got these in the school, you have this program, this after school club. Not gonna there's some famous ones of these in fascist societies. I'm not gonna name any names here, but you know, and even some that exist right now. Right? But you could be a soldier too. You know what I mean? Join our club, and eventually you could be a soldier right now. Go fight right now. Go out in the street and get a weapon and go kill a devil. Right? That's the assignment of Devil Hunters Club. That's actually really crazy. Right? That's a really crazy thing. That is like a militarized force of youths that is a part of the state school program. Okay, so there we go. Right, and then in Yuko's story, in seeing Yuko's mindset transform into a devil mindset, right? We see the militarized, violence-focused mindset of the Devil Hunter Club, right? The Chainsaw Man fan, Devil Hunter aspirant, how that mindset is like toxic and destructive and self-destructive as well. So you see, here we go. We've got the subject, the state, the relation. This time it's war. Yuko is a soldier, or like a soldier to be. And what effect does that relationship have on the subject, paralleled through like an abusive relationship that is captured by our central dynamic of Yoru and Asa. Great. That's great. Go back to Yuko arc. He's cooking. It's so gas. I love this fucking story. But I think that's given us, like, we looked at a couple smaller side examples. Let's get to the heart of the issue, which is the Yoru, Asa, Chainsaw Man, Denji quadrangle of relationships here. And why do they work the way they do? And like, what's happening now? So, as I see it, I don't think Denji's role in the story has fundamentally changed that much, which is he is like the absolute subject of the state, the total, you know, and anything and everything piled on him, right? He bears all the sins. This is the bad shit about modern life. It's Denji. Look at you, Denji. You get to suffer everything. You just suffer. You're the suffering guy. There really is no such thing as a life free of bad things when Tatsuki Fujimoto is your author. You know, yesterday I played a bunch of like Deadlock. I did a little writing. That kind of sucked. Got kind of sleepy in the middle of the day. I guess that was kind of bad, but I had a pretty good day. I enjoyed my day yesterday. It was a little productive. It's fun. I was thinking about this video. That was fun. You know, I don't think it's that bad. Tatsuki, are you okay, man? Are you doing all right? You got way more money than me, so that can't be the problem. I don't know what's going on. Are you good? I think he's fine, but he's just exploring, again, suffering. He's exploring how we suffer in these systems. And while Denji he gets to ride the ride for free. Fuck. Ugh. Yes. So Denji suffers. He is the abject subject of the state, who the state doesn't care about him, thinks of him as a tool, their own devices, isn't interested in his well-being, has no intention to protect him, wants to use him for their own ends. The abject subject. No standing within the social order, bottom of the rung, you know, garbage man. You know, if he ends up jobless and homeless, no one will care. That kind of like, that's that's what he is, man. That's the position he occupies within this story's social framework. And that hasn't really changed much in part two. Sadly, I know. I think I've said this a lot of times. Back when Denji wasn't even in the story again yet, but like Asa was pretty refreshing because she was not that. She's more like normal. Like she's more like Aki, who's I think a lot more of a relatable character. And someone like Denji is still very tragic, but like clearly has his background is like fairly well off. He had like a stable home life, and he lost it, right? He lost it in a tragedy. But there were people who did care about him at some point in the past, and there still are people who do, and so he has that sort of privilege relative to Genji in society of like this is a guy people seem to like and care about what happens with his life. And for Denji, the amount of people that do that for him is very small. It's pretty rare. Most people he runs into do not give a fuck about him, which is kind of, that's so fucking Denji. That's what I mean. He's the abject subject. No one cares. No one gives a shit. Right? These kind of people exist in the world. These kinds of stations within society exist in the world. You can see them. They're horrible. You don't like to think about them. But that's exactly the kind of stuff that Fujimoto wants to drive towards, wants to make you think about. Think about the stuff you don't want to think about. Think about the bad shit, because there is no such thing as a life free of bad things. Suffering. Ugh. You can tell I like this too much. You're like, this guy's fucking giggling talking about suffering. I get it. I get it, Fujimoto. I'm there with you. Let's go suffer more. This life is hell and we are the demons. Let's go. Let's do it. Right, so that's where Denji fits in still to the story. He's abject subject, but now the topic is war. But again, it is about what does war do to our citizenry? What are the mechanisms of war within the society that's doing war away, where war is hidden and not shown and not discussed? It's not there with you. It's not happening to you, but it is happening around you, and you are affected by it. And what are those effects? Right, and this is where Yoru versus Chainsaw Man sort of like fits in to this architecture. And this is a point I'm not quite sure on. Yoru versus Chainsaw Man. At this point in the story, we're still waiting a little bit more, but we've seen some things. Yoru lost her children in a previous war versus Chainsaw Man. And now she hates him, and so she wants to kill him. Not just kill him, wants to defeat him. This, I mean, come on. Right, so you see it, right? In war, defending children taking revenge for children, and the cycle of violence that the grief of losing family members creates. War. Ah, ah. Yes, yes, you see it. And that is fine. People are fine with that. The thing that the people don't get, I think, is the romance. Because you've got the Yoru Chainsaw Man dynamic. Everyone is sort of like they're okay. Oh, Yoru fight Chainsaw Man. Oh, Asa and Denji dynamic. Oh, teen romance. Right? Then the two things get mixed together, and shit gets really fucked up. Which is, again, that's the idea here. How does this? How do the social relations of war affect subjects? How does war impact the relation between Asa and Denji, the romance between subjects? This is this is a very this is a big time, very messy topic. Many different people have written about this. The connection between like state militarization, the security state, and like sexuality and concepts of gender in these kind of imperial societies. This is big time stuff, right? People, there are very famous philosophers. This is their entire thing. These are big time topics. How all of these things are connected, why things happen the way that they do in these kind of societies surrounding sex and sexuality and war and violence and gender and people's roles within them. And yeah, I think everyone is all good with all of it except for the Yoru and Denji dynamic. This is one that people don't appreciate. They don't appreciate it. Which, this fine. This is the most fucked up one, right? Of all of them. Yoru and Asa, you know, it's like, I took over your body, bodily autonomy, stolen from the women in imperial societies. Great. Yoru and Chainsaw Man, you know, the cycle of violence, the loss of children, the fear of your hatred being forgotten. Oh, ho, 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 ho. Yeah, it's pretty good. Yoru and Denji is the messed up one because it is a corruption of the Asa and Denji dynamic, which people really like. They like that one. Here are two poor souls in this cruel world, and you know, they're like kindred spirits, and you know they get along in a cute. They have a meet cute, and so everybody loves it. It's great, and it is great. I mean, Fujimoto, he writes chemistry for free. He just I don't know. There's some about the way he writes characters interacting. It's electric. He's just a god. He's a god of making dialogue and building interesting connections between his characters. How does he do it? I don't know. I don't really know. But the Yoru and Denji one, even though it has gotten a lot more intense lately, has been consistent over time, which is that Yoru is frustrated and confused by her concern and feelings for Denji. But the thing is, right, this is a classic, tsundere romance dynamic. But the thing is, this does not lead to like funny, cute moments. It leads to terrible horror. Like the most sort of like directly affronting moments of the story really just like aggro shit on the page are given to this dynamic, which people aren't big fans of. And I do get why. Because everything else that I've talked about, Yoru and Asa, Yoru and Chainsaw Man, Yuko, Chainsaw Man Church, you talk about the leader guys in Kyoto. You talk about them sacrificing children, the aging devil, uh, all this kind of stuff, right? Fami's plan, all of this, like it fits into this analysis of like, look how bad war is, look at how fucked up war makes life. And that's all very like sort of straightforward to interpret as destructive and abusive, because that's what happens in the story. It's not very good. But with Yoru and Danji, he leaves this weird, this twisted romantic undertone of it with Yoru's feelings towards Denji, because they are like genuine emotions. Yoru is different than Makima in that like Makima was like a scheming liar, She didn't give a shit about Denji at all, although I wonder. But, that is the read. And that's a fine read. That's a straightforward read of the story. But with Yoru, he doesn't let you. He puts her genuine emotions in there, even as like the worst things are happening in the dynamic. Which, I mean, that people are not gonna like this. Straight up, like this is a thing people are not going to like. If you have a character doing really bad stuff, and you're sort of like sympathetic to it, that character better be a hot dude. And even then, you look at like Griffith, people do not like Griffith. This is something that always is going to stir people up. And it's not just like having the stuff in there. I know some people talk about like, oh, you can't handle the content. No, it's the particular way this works, because you're not supposed to understand the perspective of the monster, right? Like you're not supposed to humanize the inhuman. You're supposed to, you're supposed to dehumanize it and abstract it, so that it can be like pulled apart in the reader's mind, and you can be like, haha, we defeated the evil together with our thinking powers. But if you make it deep and raw and like understandable, then the people are gonna be like, wait a minute, are you saying that bad people are people? And it's like, well, yeah, that's how they got there, right? They were a person who does bad stuff, but that still comes from like the same core. You are not immune to the kind of emotions that might lead you to be abusive. And that's what we get with Yoru. She is like going through this like really almost like really overdone cliche tsundere romantic thing with her thoughts around Denji, and it leads to the absolute horrific shit happening in the story. Okay, but let's bring this back. Why are we doing this with the War Devil? Like, what the fuck? This still fits within here. Right? Because Yoru is like this. She is feeling the role of the mindset of war. She wants to go to war. She is obsessed with war. She is a war hawk. She is the war devil. And so in her mindset, she does not care about like the lives of anybody, including Asa, right? Like out of the gate, she's like, I'm gonna kill you, Asa. Now, who knows where she lands now? Things have changed a lot with her and Asa since the beginning. But fundamentally, she doesn't give a shit about Asa, like, overall, or she wouldn't be doing she would not. If she really cared that much about Asa, she would just leave. She would just let Asa run. She would just chill out, let Asa run the show. But that's not it. You know what I mean? That's not how it's going. She's developed some amount of concern, it seems, but not enough to like not take over her body and control her body at a time, and you know, inhabit her mind as a devil. So you know, she doesn't really care, and that's a big thing about like the mindset of war. Is like you just use the citizens as tools. Like I said, these are your pawns, these are your playthings, these are your soldiers to go send off to fight and die. You don't fight and die, they fight and die. You control them, they don't matter to you. The fact that they die is not a concern to you. You are not concerned with anybody. You have no love, you know what I mean? The war devil doesn't know anything about love because there is no love in war. It's just destruction and hatred and violence and control. Right? And so, when this kind of mindset encounters like genuine emotional connection, this is confusing. This is threatening. This is upsetting. Because it is like the things that matter to you, you can't just use them and throw them away. So if there's things that you have these feelings about, then you can't treat them as tools in your war. But, okay, but that doesn't like make them special. Over on the other side of war, there's all the stuff that you just don't care about and you throw away, and it's all garbage, and all the humans can die, they can just become weapons for me, da 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 da. Then things you actually are concerned about, you can't throw them away like that, but the dynamic there is still abusive. Right? So like Denji is now like a precious subject to the system of war that that Yoru represents, right? He's special. He's Chainsaw Man, which makes him special in the eyes of broader society as well, and eyes of public safety as well. But then that like feeling doesn't drive like reconciliation or you know, reconsideration or anything like that. It just twists the concern into other forms of violence. You see what I mean? There's no relation affected by the structures of war. It isn't infected with violence, right? And so even if the motives of war are concerned with a subject like children, for example, Yoru wants to save her children, but then she turns her children into weapons anyways. Even if there is that concern, even if there is that emotion, it doesn't matter, because the concept, like, war cannot be loving. It is the violent, destructive mindset has to be detached from real emotional connection. And so any emotional connections that do have get twisted into abuse. There you go. Yeah, there we go. Yoru and Denji. Right, and this brings it down to like the impact that a sort of ambient war, that the war of an imperial power has on the relations between between subjects to each other. So like Asa and Denji's relationship becomes warped by the war devil. The war devil interjects in the team rom-com life of these two individuals and twists it and turns it into destruction and abuse. And right, Asa, what's her mindset in this? She thinks this fight is gonna save him. You see what I mean? Like, oh, we're fighting to save Denji. We're fighting to save the abject subject. Meanwhile, the abject subject is getting abused on all fronts and internalizing it, and all sorts of horrible shit, suffering, lock in to suffer. And I think there's even more to it. I really once again, I've yapped for like an hour about Chainsaw Man, and there's still plenty more in the tank, but I hope this ranting helps give some kind of like perspective to this dynamic that's happening. I see people talking about it and they're like almost getting there, but it's like, because it's such a shocking topic to address directly, there's sort of like a wall on the discussion. Like everything else aside from like these sliver of pages in the story, people get it. Like they're like, oh yes, war and this and that and this, oh, the state and the citizen and children and adults and mother and child and all this kind of stuff. And then it gets to this moment which fits right in there of like romance, family, sexuality, abuse, war, love, hatred, all these things connected together, and being built into this structure, this narrative structure that outlines this kind of analysis. And then this one thing, it's like it's too at the core, it's too charged within cultural discourse already, and so it's like you can't bring that in, even though this is like a big part. This is a big, if you talk about the overlap of like fascist, war hawk, nationalistic, vengeance driven mindsets, Which again, just look out in the world. Lots of relevant ones out there in the political landscape right now in Japan, but definitely not limited to Japan. I'm gonna leave. Pick your favorite one. Everybody's got one they really hate, and there's a lot of them. When you're talking about that stuff, sexual assault, it's right in there, and like how it fits into war specifically, but then even more so just into the mindset, that kind of fascistic mindset around war, vengeance driven, protect the children, you know, this like genuine, like human emotion of like this twisted love for your family, this twisted love for the people around you. It turns into violence, creates this abuse, and doesn't make it's not good. It's not good for the people involved. It causes suffering. And how does the suffering work? Well, let's watch, Tune in next Tuesday for another episode of the Public Safety Special Broadcast where we will suffer together some more. Yum, yum, yum. I love to suffer. Yeah, it's been quite the stretch of the story. I mean, the whole fucking story has been pretty cracked. Definitely a very different story structure than I've ever seen before. Definitely delving into topics that you don't see a lot of in popular media because yeah, this is not everybody's favorite thing to think about all the time, and especially when you really focus on the suffering. You know what I mean? People like hope in this kind of analysis. People like retribution in their fiction. They like to see a little justice served in the mind's eye when so often justice is not served in the real world. And, Fujimoto might not be the biggest fan of that idea overall, as even the concept. You don't get a lot of that. And we're definitely not getting a lot of that in part 2. And he's definitely taking it to that idea pretty hard. But he's not afraid to give you the suffering that would make you want it. You know what I mean? He's like, yeah, enjoy some suffering. Vengeance is like not even possible because these are immortal devils. Blah, 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 blah. Eternal suffering. Heat of the universe. This fucking guy. Swear to God. But it's very interesting. It's still very interesting. Yoru is still very interesting. I still have my contract with the War Devil. Still like the War Devil. Fascinating character. Absolutely pushing it to places I didn't expect it to go. But very interesting nonetheless. Yeah. She's a horrible, horrific devil who has been consumed by hatred and vengeance to the point that it has led her down a path of destruction and abuse. There you go. That's who she is. That's what's going on in the story. That's what the story's about with regards to the War Devil from my perspective. I'm seeing here. This is simply one interpretation, but I do think, a lot of this stuff is kind of like, he's not letting you get away with anything. He's like, this is the War Devil. And okay, all right. Okay, war. I don't think about this. And if you do, And if you go through the story, you'll see it all. See how it all, fits into this thought on a single topic. And then maybe if you have the perspective, you can go back to the story. You can let go a little bit of like your narrative goals, your narrative hopes. Be a little more open-minded to where things are going, what's happening in the story, the idea that there's like some thought and meaning behind this isn't just like randomly shocking. It is shocking though. And it's not an easy read. This is really weird, very confusing. Personally, I'm lost on what this aging devil domain thing is gonna be about. I don't know. In domain expansion with the bang, yeah. I don't know. And where's the next chapter going? I don't know. I really hope it's not anywhere too crazy. Because, I mean, what I just said, yeah, I mean, yeah. Yeah. Fujimoto doesn't cross certain lines. But he's been going kind of crazy lately, so, maybe he just takes a big swing for the road and packs it in. I don't know. I hope not. I don't think it makes sense with what I described of Yoru either, and like what we've seen of her character and her emotions around this. I don't think the worst case that people have been talking about really makes sense there. But you never know with this fucking guy. So, ugh. Prepare for trouble and make it double. I was your host, Secret Doves. Thank you everyone for tuning in and listening to me talk about the War Devil. One of my favorite things to talk about in Chainsaw Man. We will be back here for a chapter review and another chapter review after that when the new chapter comes out. And we'll see what fucking happens. Thank you all for watching and goodbye.